got an update on this story from the flood in Texas, where it turns out that we are now learning that FEMA actually was not able to answer thousands of calls because of Kristi Noem and Donald Trump's cuts to the federal government. But first, let's get to this story about FEMA, where Kristi Noem and Donald Trump likely could have been the reason that some people aren't alive today from Texas. Truly. And as we're learning that Donald Trump and Kristi Noem had thousands of calls that were unanswered from people in the floods, we also have learned that Kristi Noem and Donald Trump delayed FEMA for 3 days in Texas.
So according to 4 officials inside FEMA, that federal response may not have been as fast as it might have been. They say that a new rule that any expenditure over $100,000 needed sign-off from Secretary Noem slowed the federal response. These sources tell us that FEMA's deployment of urban search and rescue teams, which are typically deployed in anticipation they might be needed, instead was delayed until Monday, 3 days after the flood. Now, a source also tells us that a request Texas made for FEMA aerial imagery to aid in the search was also delayed, waiting for Secretary Noem's approval. Now, additionally, multiple FEMA officials say that they were taken aback by the agency's relatively limited response in the immediate aftermath of the disaster. CNN has reached out to FEMA for comment. So far, no reply from the agency. However, a DHS spokeswoman more generally told CNN that FEMA is, in her words, quote, shifting from bloated DC-centric dead weight to a lean deployable disaster force that empowers state actors to provide relief for their citizens.
Absolutely insane. When a disaster happens and when emergencies are taking place, it is imperative, as you know, if you call 911, you're not hoping that they get there in 3 hours. You're hoping they get there as soon as possible, because every minute counts. That's the same thing with natural disasters, just on a much larger scale. So waiting 3 days is abhorrent. And people died because of that decision. Here's a bit of this story from the Times saying that FEMA also didn't answer calls, thousands and thousands of calls from flood survivors, documents show. The 2 days after the catastrophic flood, so it waited 3 days for a response on the ground, but 2 days after the flood roared through central Texas, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, also known as FEMA, did not answer nearly 2/3 of calls to its disaster assistance line. The lack of responsiveness happened because the agency had fired hundreds of contractors at call centers, according to a person briefed on the matter. The agency laid off the contractors on July 5th after their contracts expired and were not extended. According to the documents and the person briefed on the matter, Kristi Noem, the Homeland Security Secretary, who has instituted a new requirement that she personally approve expenses, which we just heard about, over $100,000, did not renew the contracts until Thursday, 5 days after the contracts expired. FEMA is part of the Department of Homeland Security. So because of Kristi Noem and because of this new rule where she supposedly has to sign off on any spending, that there was a delay and lapse in the services the government can provide. And because she was not paying attention, and because I don't understand that, first off, because Congress appropriates those funds for that specific organization. She shouldn't be able to decide what does and doesn't get spent. Congress has already appropriated the funds. This, to me, sounds unconstitutional. It sounds unconstitutional. But I know we're just going through many different moments where unconstitutional things are happening and we just move on. I don't think we should, but that's what's happening right now. They're expanding the powers of the executive branch while also encroaching on what Congress is supposed to be doing. And Donald Trump apparently is totally fine with this, because here's how he thought FEMA did. Knowing what we know, that there was 3 days of waiting, 2/3 of calls not being answered. Here's how Donald Trump said FEMA did.
Families we've heard from are obviously upset because they say that those warnings, those alerts didn't go out in time, and they also say that people could have been saved. What do you say to those families?
Well, I think everyone did an incredible job under the circumstances. This was, I guess Kristi said, a 1 in 500, 1 in 1,000 years. And I just have admiration for the job that everybody did. There was just admiration. Only a bad person would ask a question like that, to be honest with you. I don't know who you are, but only a very evil person would ask a question like that. I think this has been heroism. This has been incredible.
No, an evil person would delay services that Congress has already approved because they don't want to spend. Have trillions and trillions of dollars. And because they are trying to cut the government and trying to make the government work less efficiently, people are dying. That to me is evil. Asking a question about whether or not the department was responsive enough is exactly what that reporter should be doing. So I don't know who that reporter was, but thank you for pushing back on this dictator who is truly creating problems and killing people. Now, Donald Trump was going to get rid of FEMA, but he has now decided that he's not going to do that because, as they're seeing, they kind of need it, kind of need FEMA. And friend of the show, Congressman Jared Moskowitz, said this about FEMA's Texas response.
No, I've not gotten any response to my official letter, Anderson. I don't expect it. Congress is on break. But when we get back on Monday, I'll be going to see the chairman and ranking members of both committees, because the idea that FEMA did not send or activate, because FEMA doesn't have swift water rescue crews. These crews are located in other states. They were either located in New Orleans, they were located out of Omaha, or even out of Florida, where Task Force 1 and Task Force 2 are located. The idea that they weren't activated within 24 hours, and it took 3 days for the secretary to make that decision, is not only unconscionable, I've never even heard of FEMA doing that. These decisions usually get made quickly. They get made by the FEMA administrator. And that's part of the problem here, is that, look, we've known for a while that FEMA's needed reform. There's lots of reforms that have been proposed. But what the secretary has done is actually broken the agency to the point that the only person who can make a decision is the secretary, no longer the acting administrator, who, by the way, hasn't even been on the ground. Again, that is unprecedented. The idea that the FEMA administrator is not on the ground with the president, always travels with the president, always travels with the secretary.
So they have created a situation that is making us less safe. The government's less useful. I personally believe the government should be invisible because it should do things that we don't even realize it's doing. We never say to ourselves, it's never breaking news. Every plane landed without crashing today. Breaking news, drinking water, again, was safe. But it's because of the government that stuff happens. And it might very well have been that if these services were in place, they were warned adequately, we could measure the flood appropriately, and we also had a response that was quick and efficient, we might not even be talking about this because the government would have been doing its job. But Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and all of his other goons are trying to do everything they can to make the government stop working. So you stop believing in it, and we are not going to stop talking about it. So please do hit like on this video. Please do subscribe. We're going to keep chasing this story, and I'll see you next time. Bye.